Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any moderators out there and or channel members. We have an amazing show lined up for you guys here today with veteran radio host and legend Clyde Lewis. And this episode is brought to you by Contact in the Desert this year, 2024 in Indian Wells, California. A really great lineup of speakers this year, May 30th. Through June 3rd. Get your tickets now, and I will be there and come through and say hi. Link to the on-sale tickets are in the description of this video, and if you use promo code EARTH10, you get an extra 10% off that ticket price. And today we have with us a keynote speaker from Contact this year, veteran writer, author, TV and radio personality, the host of the legendary GroundZero Radio, Clyde Lewis. Welcome to the show. How's it going, my friend?
Doing really well, Ryder. The weather's horrible out here in the Pacific Northwest, but I'm warm and cozy, and I'm ready to do a show with you. I'm very excited to be a part of this program. So I'm sure you and I are going to get in a lot of deep discussion. I'm hoping that I can keep up.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to have you on. Your status in this community of the paranormal and strange, which I believe encompasses a lot of different phenomena, just how they, changed the name of UFO to UAP to include much more of the phenomenon than just objects, right? It's now a phenomenon, but you've been hosting and talking about this stuff since 95, I believe. And you've had GroundZero Radio since 95. And I feel like I know a lot about a lot of stuff, but compared to you, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I'm a rookie in comparison, just based off the sheer number of years that you've been doing this. And anyway, all that to say that I'm excited to have you on.
It's definitely a journey. It's definitely a lot of learning, a lot of experiencing, where you can, I guess, safely say that there are things that aren't explained. There are things that are covered up. There are things that certainly are outrageous. I just think that the attitude and the evolution of what we call conspiracy theory has changed over time, because now it's become a malicious type of pejorative, I think, and it's not fair, because you look at the history of what conspiracy is, and theories are theories. We know they're theories. They're not necessarily based on truth, although there's empirical evidence that could show that we could open up some of these things, reprogram them and reprocess them and see if they could make a great story. And if they do, you check out and you investigate. But if there is not any truth to it, it's a lie. Lies are lies. Theories are theories. But there are conspiracies, real cover-ups. And there are a lot of people that want to fill in the blanks because the media is not doing their job. And when the media doesn't do their job in bringing us background and context, then people start filling in the blanks with their own conspiracy theories. Some of them pretty clever, others not so clever.
But then that brings about a whole wave of a bunch of ridiculous nonsense pounded upon some truth as well, and I think the intelligence community and the military uses that, a lot of that nonsense to their advantage. But besides that, I guess the easiest place to start here with you this evening is, what would you say is the most profound experience since you've had your radio show GroundZero, since it's been on air, that's changed your perception and beliefs and ideas of what you may have previously had? I know that that's a loaded question, but I think that's important for people to see and hear your evolution of where you first started, because I feel like we all have an evolution of our content and evolution of our own personal thoughts and ideas and beliefs. Is there anything that you personally feel that kind of is on the top of that list? Like, yeah, this is something that's really changed for me, and it can be an entire subject, it can be a topic, or does anything stick out?
My view on ghosts, pretty much. I've been involved with a lot of ghost hunts and investigations, and I believe that a lot of the ghost situations, the ghost TV shows, all those things are a lot more Hollywood than they should be. And I don't think we get a very sound discussion of why ghosts appear in the first place, or what they look like, or what to expect. And I think a lot of the time, people are expecting to see a full-on apparition, when sometimes an orb will suffice, or perhaps there's a wisp of smoke, or something that looks like smoke, or something that a presence that you can't see, but you feel. I'm also not a proponent of New Age type practices with ghost hunting and with ghost clearing. I'm not a big fan of having a medium come into a ghost hunt and say things like, go to the light. It'd be like me coming into your studio and saying, hey, Ryder, go to the bathroom. And if you say, well, I don't want to go to the bathroom, I say, well, to hell with that. Go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom. And you get angry at me. You say, Clyde, I don't have to go to the bathroom. And that's exactly how I feel when people go into these, ghost hunts, and they act like that munchkin from Poltergeist. And they start saying things like, go to the light, and then they satisfy themselves by saying, I cleared this ghost. And I'm like, and then they come back, the ghost comes back, and they're saying, well, I thought the ghost was cleared. No, if the ghost is there, then the ghost has a message to give. And the ghost is not going to go just because somebody is punishing them or, it's not going to happen. People are people. If it's a human entity or the essence of a human entity, we're going to have to look at this not just from a paranormal angle, but from a scientific angle. In fact, it's so important that they look at this from a scientific angle that now CERN is looking into 4D ghost detection by saying that if they are able to break up particles and they are to look at ghosts as particles, then yes, they may be able to find that what we're dealing with is not the dead, but we're dealing with dimension. And that when we die, or when the ghost is given up, if you will, we end up materializing in another area, or we wind up being broadcast. It's like your body is like a TV set. My body is like a TV set. And the personality that is me is being transmitted, and I'm broadcasting it. But when I die, or when you die, that broadcast ceases to exist, but then it goes somewhere else and occupies another space. And if it occupies another dimension, and somehow that intelligence that is me, or the intelligence you, finds a way to break through the overlap that we have with a quantum entanglement, you're able to have a ghost. Or you're able to have somebody that there's something called, what's it called? I'll think of the name in a minute. But it's the idea that you can be in two places at once. And so there are people.
Bilocation.
What's that?
Bilocation.
Yeah, superposition. There you go.
Superposition.
Superposition. Thank you. The idea that superposition and bilocation exists in quantum entanglement, meaning that there are people who can have out-of-body experiences and be at two places at once. So there are people that have never talked about this, but they have been haunted by living people. So my perspective on ghosts and the paranormal in that regard have changed. And in that regard, I backed off a bit on talking about ghosts, because I'm still now having to relearn some of the things that I have taken for granted. And I've had many occasions. In fact, a lot of people know that at one time I was doing an investigation into the Zodiac killer. And we went to Martinez, California. We were at the Martinez Gazette. And we were investigating the possibility that Richard Gaikowski, who is the editor of the Martinez Gazette, was haunting the newspaper, the facility, and that he was the Zodiac. And so here we are doing this interview, and I'm interviewing this woman. This woman's a ghost hunter, and she's crying because she feels the spirit of the Zodiac. She's terrified. She gets up and she leaves, and the ghost hunters are over on the other side of the room saying, well, you've attacked this weak person. Come and attack us. Come after us. And what was bad about that is I had just gotten out of the hospital from cancer surgery. And so, no, she wasn't the weakest person in the room. I happened to be the weakest person in the room because I just got out of the hospital. And so what happens is the ghost decides that he's going to come after me. And all of a sudden I feel this tightness around my neck. I feel like I'm choking. I feel like I'm going to die. I start crying, start throwing up. I start, and this is, here I am on, I'm on satellite radio. I'm on national radio, and I'm falling apart on the air. And I have to run outside, and I have to hug a tree, and I have to, put my feet in the mud and ground myself, because I feel as though that I'm under attack. And while everybody else is saying, let's have an after party after this ghost investigation, I'm sitting in the car trying not to puke. So, I learned a lot about how there are these forces that can get into you, that you can't shake them off, and that you have to be very careful when you're dealing with the paranormal, because especially when it comes to ghosts. So I'm relearning what I thought I knew about ghosts. I'm relearning it from a standpoint of quantum entanglement. And I think that, to me, should be done. And we should branch that out from just a bunch of people in ultraviolet light or a night vision, looking around old hospitals and old houses. I think that we need to go beyond that now and have some sort of way of scientifically showing that there is something that's overlapping. It's like bubbles roiling in a boil. They all overlap on each other. And I think that's what we're living in right now. We live in a universe that has different dimensions that overlap, and every once in a while we get a glimpse of those dimensions, and that's why we have the paranormal like we do.
Yeah, I agree with some of that, and that's a big reason why I don't do any paranormal investigation anymore. And with Jerry Marzinski, he kind of believes the same thing that you do, but relates it more to like our thoughts, that our thoughts are coming from like a radio signal somewhere outside of us, and it depends on where we turn and tune that dial to, depends on the kind of thoughts that we get. And that's a really interesting concept about the paranormal that you just bring in there. But I just won't do it anymore because I'm not in that place anymore, and they really can like get you down like hardcore.
Well, you're absorbing all of that, and the body can only take so much. I mean, I've done mediumship before. Once a year, I do a Ouija board on the air. I'm not one to play with Ouija boards. Everybody's like, bring out the Ouija board. No, I'm not going to do that. And I'm getting too old for this. I mean, ghost hunting's for the young. I'm now 60. I've been out this now for 30 years. And, the younger people can go out and get that information. I can interview them now. I don't have to go out and do it. But I wanted to experience that. I don't want to be the guy that, goes on the air and has canned questions for the guest and not say, well, I've experienced this. I can relate to what you're saying because I experienced this thing. And that I think is the most important thing about my career is the experiences that I've had and the real experiences and meeting real people who've had real experiences and understanding that, what Hollywood is doing and what the media is doing is they make it look so simple. But what they don't understand is the people who have these experiences, they have to go to therapy. Some of them want to commit suicide. Some of them are not happy with the fact that they've either been abducted by aliens or they've been, visited by a ghost or their dead grandmother or something. They're not happy with that. They can't settle with that. And some people have, like, for example, near-death experiences. They come out of near-death experiences with 1 foot on the other side and 1 foot in this side. So that's why people who've had near-death experiences always seem to be more like they're mediums, more like they see the future, more like they have the grip on both this side and that side. It's because they do. Part of them was left behind. Part of that was there. Part of that's here. And that side over there is still beckoning them to come back. And I've, that's been something that I've learned over the years as well, is that, it's not cookie cutter experiences. And it seems that they want us to think they're cookie cutter experiences. And that's why every new ghost show that comes out, every new Bigfoot show that comes out, it never seems to, capture my imagination, because I think what's most important about these types of investigations is A, where's the science, and B, where's the history? I think both should be history lessons and science lessons, and not just a substitute for spirituality. I just don't think it should be that way.
Well, it's really interesting how you can take a group of paranormal investigators to a location and they'll come back with something paranormal. If you take a pair of Bigfoot researchers to that same location, they'll come back and say that it's Bigfoot. If you take UFO investigators to that same location, you get what I'm saying? Like it's like their preconceived notions have built around this belief system and this belief structure, and whatever it is that they believe in is normally what they end up finding.
There is a caveat to that, and that is this. I was once called in to do an investigation at a restaurant in Portland. It was in Multnomah Village, a place called Fat City. It was a very old restaurant. In fact, it's so old that one of the mayors there, the governor there, or somebody fired the police chief right there at that restaurant. But there was a woman that worked there named Vivian, and she was shot and killed by a guy who was like stalking her. He'd come into the restaurant, he'd order from her, and he stalked her. And then one day, as she was going downstairs into the cooler to get some milk or something, he shot her there on the staircase. So apparently, there was a ghost in the place, and they were telling us. They said, "Well, we believe it's Vivian. We believe that Vivian is she's there and she's haunting the place. We need you to come in, and we need you to do some investigating." Well, I thought, okay, I'll go and do the investigation. Now, we had a bunch of other people from other, we announced on the show that we were going to do an investigation into this Vivian thing. So we had paranormal investigators. They were all over the place, and they were basically interfering with our investigation. But they'd come out and they'd say, "Oh, we've got Vivian on screen. Oh, we got Vivian on EVP. We got Vivian." And what had happened is there was no proof that it was Vivian. It was only like a few EVPs were like saying things like "get out" or "back off" or the typical stuff. Well, my wife, who is an empath, who was with me, decided to take me downstairs with her and said, "Hey, I'm not getting a Vivian here." And I said, "Well, what are you getting?" And she says, "I'm getting Humphrey Bogart." I go, "What?" She says, "I'm getting Humphrey Bogart. I get the name Humphrey Bogart, the actor." And I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, Humphrey Bogart, what would that have anything to do with?" So we're doing some EVP up and around the restaurant, upstairs in the attic and everything. We get an EVP that says, "Oh, the violence." Played over and over again. "Oh, the violence." And then we heard this woman say, "Maya. I am Maya." It said it's Maya or Mio or something. We couldn't quite figure it out. So I went back to the owners of the restaurant and I said, "I don't know if Vivian is haunting your restaurant." And she says, "Well, who do you think's haunting the restaurant?" I go, "Humphrey Bogart." She goes, "Humphrey Bogart? What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, well, my wife thinks it's Humphrey Bogart, but we got an EVP of someone calling themselves Mia or Mayo, and that she doesn't like the violence." And so we went back and we analyzed it, and that's what we got. I said, "I guess I don't know why Humphrey Bogart, why she thinks it's Humphrey Bogart, whatever." Well, come to find out, I do a show about it. I talk about it on the air about the we went in looking for Vivian and we got out with this woman and my wife getting this feeling that Humphrey Bogart was haunting the place. And we get a phone call from a film historian. And he says to me, "Do you realize that Humphrey Bogart's wife died upstairs at the Fat City Cafe?" I said, "No." Her name was Mayo Method. That was her name, Mayo Method. They called them the Dueling Bogarts because she was married to Humphrey Bogart. And they had a violent relationship, even a relationship where she shot him in the stomach with a gun. She loved Humphrey Bogart, but they couldn't get along. So she ended up moving to a flop house, which was above the restaurant, and she drank herself to death. So we went in with the idea that Vivian was going to be there. All these other people were saying, "We got Vivian, we got Vivian." But then they didn't take time to listen to what the ghosts have to say. They just, "I've got an EVP. Yay, we got this." No, you take the time to listen to what the ghosts have to say. And then you finally realize that there may be some history to that. Luckily, we had that film historian listening to the program. And so now when you go to Fat City, they actually have a picture that is dedicated to Mayo Method saying that her ghost haunts the restaurant. No more is it Vivian. It's Mayo Method because we went through the painstaking idea of investigating, listening, and eventually we came in contact with somebody who knew the history of the building and that Humphrey Bogart's wife, first wife, ended up dying there. And that was one of the most amazing ghost hunts I ever was a part of.
Yeah, that's incredible. Even to the point where they put a plaque of saying that Humphrey Bogart haunts the place. That's really incredible. And speaking of the paranormal and the unexplained, you were recently a part of this Netflix series of Files of the Unexplained, which I believe was Netflix's most watched docuseries of all time. And you were in episode number 7 talking about the toxic blobs of Oakville, Washington in 1994, right, which I was kind of surprised that I had never heard of that before, and I knew about all the other ones that they showed in the docuseries besides the feet episode. But this
Mhm.
reminded me of a few other events. But for the people that have no idea what we're talking about here, could you briefly explain what happened with these toxic blobs that rained down on Oakville, Washington? Not the toxic blobs in
Mm.
Washington D.C. Now that's a whole other story that
Right,
we'll leave for
right.
another time. But Oakville, Washington state blobs.
Well, one of the things about this series that I was involved with, the people were so wonderful, and I want to give kudos to them. They did a great job with it. They came to me pretty much because I did a story about the Blob, which was sort of a fun Halloween show that I did about the real Blob and what it was. And I don't know if people realize the Blob is based on a true story. It's, of course, it's loose with the facts, but it's based on a story about two police officers. I believe it was in Philadelphia, who they got word that something had crashed. They saw this big bright light in the sky, came down and crashed. And when they went to investigate it, they saw what looked like some sort of red jelly that was on the ground in the hole where this thing came down. And so they called back to the station and they said, it's nothing. It was a meteor or something crashed here, but there was a red jelly that we saw that was bubbling, and we didn't want to get near it because it looked kind of bizarre. And as the police officer's on the phone, he sees the telephone pole, and the red jelly is climbing up the telephone pole. And it freaked him out. Well, the situation in Oakville, Washington, is not as comical or as scary as that is, but it is, again, a modern day tale of the Blob back in the 90s when in Oakville, Washington, there were a number of rain showers that came through that small area, rural area that's far away from the ocean, but still close enough. And it rained there, and they noticed that the rain was kind of like gelatin. It was like a viscous rain. It was like raining of snot. And they didn't know what to think of it. And there were some police officers that said that it would smear on the windows, and some of the animals were exposed to it, and they ended up dying. And then there were other people that were collecting this stuff because they didn't know what it was, and they thought it needed to be analyzed. And the one person in the interview that their mother had touched it, and she got very ill, and she was in the hospital for a long period of time. And so the daughter of this mother wanted to go and get analysis done on these blobs, and come to find out that they were human white blood cells that were in this. And so they were estimating that it could have been, blue ice that fell from the area. And no, it wasn't blue. They didn't, blue ice, of course, comes from jet aircraft, but usually jet plane toilets are emptied out of the airport every once in a while, but not always. But they did a lot of investigation into what it was. And so they found out that it, like I said, white blood cells. They didn't know where it was coming from. And then the military stepped in and they said, well, we're thinking that it was jellyfish, that we blew up stuff in the ocean. We were doing a sham battle in the ocean, and we were setting off bombs, and that there was a rain of jellyfish. Now,
do people take that seriously? That sounds like such an outlandish theory that these jellyfish could explode and then come down in the rain. I don't know.
Well, here's something to think about. And even though I don't buy the jellyfish story, if you're a Fortean and you read Charles Fort, you know that there have been incidences where there have been rains of frogs or rains of fish. Now, what happens with that is you have water spouts, which are tornadoes that form over the ocean or over lakes, sucking the frogs and sucking the fish into the sky, throwing them into the atmosphere. And then later on, over a town across the way, there's a rain of fish going on, or a rain of frogs. Now, that's great if they found that there was a water spout in the ocean, sucked up a bunch of jellyfish, and had them come over Oakville. But Oakville had this happen 6 times. 6 storms brought these blobs. So you can't tell me that those 6 times it was jellyfish, because that's a lot of jellyfish to be dropping over an area like Oakville. So I would say that it was, again, much like experimentations and gain of function exercises they've done in the past, that this is what they've done. This is what they were doing. That they were experimenting on a small town, just like they do in St. Louis. In fact, they brought up something that I talked about in the interview. They brought a guy in to talk about how they did an experiment with fog in San Francisco. And what they did is they used Serratia mercescens, and there were people that got it because they wanted to figure out if San Francisco would be a great vector area for a biological attack. Well, of course, it's the Bay Area. I'm sure they could bring a fog in that would kill a bunch of people and let the fog out again. So they did that experiment on people, and some people today still have Serratia. Just like they do gain of function exercises with, I mean, you hear what Dr. Fauci had talked about back when they were, they were interrogating him over COVID. They do this all the time, and it's something that some scientists frown on, but they do it. They've dropped cadmium sulfide over areas like St. Louis. They did it over Utah. In fact, The Stand, Stephen King's Stand, was written about an accident that happened in Skull Valley, where some, I guess, fertilizer of some kind came out of these rail cars that derailed and killed a bunch of sheep. Now, if that would have blown to the north, it would have killed most of Salt Lake City. So, these things happen. I mean, you look at what happened with what happened in Ohio, where the train derailed, and there was actually a movie called White Noise that was made about it. And it was
really good movie.
The thing happened. So, I mean, this stuff
that was a wild one. I couldn't believe that happened. And also, I think it's interesting too, because when I was looking into this, I was thinking, well, was the HARP facility in Alaska in operation during?
I believe it was. Yeah, it was the 90s. So yeah, I'm sure it was in operation. Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like a military operation, like most things are when you really look into them, are military operations. And Washington State is the state itself would be the closest state in the U.S. to the HARP facility in Alaska. So it's not.
Well, and there are a lot of Air Force bases there too. I mean, they're surrounded by Air Force bases, so there are plenty. I mean, they do a lot of in Olympia, Washington. They do a lot of electronic weapons tests there. And they've warned people to stay out of that area when they're over the Olympic Peninsula. They do a lot of weaponry, and so yeah, they do a lot of things there. But I just don't, especially with all the scientists and what they were saying about it, and what they and how a lot of it was covered up, how a lot of the samples were taken from scientists. I think something was going on. Some sort of a biological test was going on over Oakville, and they didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah, because it's interesting. The samples were then tested. It said that there was blood cells in them. It was retested. It said that they weren't in there, and then they just lose the samples, right? Or the samples dissipate or dematerialize or something strange like that. So there's no more testing samples of it, and it hasn't happened again for them to get more to be able to test it. It's a really strange event.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a number of things, but it's still a mystery. And a lot of the, I guess you could call the simple explanations they give for this, they don't measure up to scrutiny. They just don't. And yet people will take that, they'll take that because they don't want to believe that something hideous or diabolical would be going on where, American citizens would be tested upon. But yet we hear the Tuskegee experiments on airmen getting syphilis injected into them, and the fact that they were testing nuclear weapons in near Las Vegas, and that fallout was coming over St. George, Utah, and people were being affected by the radiation. And they did that for, they say, well, we're doing it for national security reasons. Well, look what happens to all the people who get cancer in those areas because they were doing tests for national security reasons. So yeah, don't kid yourself. They do these things and they don't care who they harm. They just do it.
That's right. 100%. Now, it's interesting. We were talking before we started the show about the Yuba County 5, known as the American Dyatlov Pass incident, which is also a part of the Netflix docu-series that you were a part of. I believe that would have been episode number 3, I think it was. Or maybe it was, yes, episode number 3, file missing Yuba County 5. And this is a really interesting case right here. And I had heard about it around 6 years ago because I follow this YouTube channel called Bedtime Stories, where they do a bunch of weird and creepy, fascinating stories. And I had watched that episode around 6 years ago. And then it just recently came up in this docu-series. I thought this one was really interesting, and I kind of wanted to get your take on it as well, because a lot of people have looked into it and they don't know what to think about it. They think it's one of the most strange cases that they've ever really looked into. And there's a lot of theories out there about it, and Netflix proposes quite a few of those theories, and a few of those theories come from the family members themselves, as far as the one missing gentleman that was never found was the one that was actually responsible for killing the boys. And I think another theory was brought to light that another group of men caught them on the bridge on the way to the mountain there where they were found, and they ended up killing him and throwing him off the bridge. The boys were so scared that they ran into the mountains. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this whole case.
Well, one of the things I did is I interviewed the producers of the show, and even though this is my favorite episode in the Netflix series, I asked them. I said I was very surprised that they didn't take a UFO take on this, or an abduction possibility, because it reminded me of Travis Walton in a way. It reminded me of the Fire in the Sky stories. Just the idea that, you know, you have these young men who are in the woods. They go to a basketball game. They're coming back. They know their way. They've driven it many times. It's not a big deal. They do point out, though, that they were emotionally challenged, or they were mentally challenged in a lot of respects. But what gets me is that, I mean, I was thinking to myself as I was watching it, what if something, you know how people who are, are autistic or have mental disabilities, sometimes they like shiny things, right? They get excited about seeing, something extraordinary. Hell, I do. Okay. If I see some shiny thing out there, I'm going to whoa, it's a shiny thing. I need to look at it. So I was just thinking to myself, well, and they said that they were thinking about going that route, but there was no proof to show that. But just the idea that here they were driving back, and then they see something like a UFO, and they follow it. And by the time they follow it, they realize they're lost. So they get out of the car and they're walking around trying to still find this thing. And they end up getting lost. They end up getting sick. They end up, having to stay in that motorhome or whatever it was. And one of the other guys, then they end up freezing to death. Hypothermia takes over. And the same type of theories are thrown about by Dyatlov Pass, whether it be they were attacked by some alien force, or maybe there was a Yeti out there that ripped them to shreds, or whatever. I mean, there were so many different scenarios. I mean, the practical ones make sense about the idea that they could have been abducted. They could have, abducted by a human group of guys that wanted to make life hell for them. And that certainly is something to think about. But I was just thinking that it just struck me as being more paranormal than normal. And of course, my brain traveled to that area where, maybe they saw something. Because I know that there have been stories about human abductions where people have died or they've been mutilated like cows. And so I that's one of the stories that a lot of ufologists and others don't want to go to.
They want to ignore that whole subject. I've brought that up several times to speakers at conferences and stuff that do talks on cattle mutilations. I walk up there and I'm like, hey, cattle mutilations are one thing. What about these human mutilations? And they don't want to touch it.
They don't want to talk about those.
They don't even want to go there. But I just had Trey Hudson on recently. He was a retired DOD, and he brought up the instances that he knew of in the documentation and the autopsy of human mutilations. And people don't know what to think about that. They really don't. They're like, because again, it's like one thing with cattle. Cattle is, you can remove yourself from cattle, but with something that's threatening humans, that's a completely different story.
Yeah, I mean, the first known abduction that I heard about, well, the mutilation was in Brazil, where a man was mutilated in Brazil. And then you heard that story about what they call the face peelers. I think that's in Peru. So there's a lot of stories about these very vicious, bloodthirsty aliens or bloodthirsty creatures that are in South America. But there have been stories about, like, I remember reading a story once about a UFO that chased a blood bank van that was carrying blood that was donated, and so they're chasing. And then the idea that, and a lot of people dismiss this, that there was one time where there was a crashed saucer, and what they found on the saucer was what they called what do they call it? Hemadigestives, where they were dealing with digested blood, human blood, cow blood, that was on these spaceships. Just the idea that maybe these aliens are carnivorous, and that they use us for food, or they use us for some kind of they breed us for food. They take our cells, they breed us, they take us back to their planet, and they have plenty of food to eat when they take us back, or they take the cells back. I mean,
you know who had that theory? You know who had that theory from way back? You just mentioned him earlier, which was Charles Fort. He was one of the first people that talked about that in the 20s. That were like a farm for these extraterrestrials, and people like Jeremy Corbell and other people within the community have like copied that and taken that and turned it into like their own thing. Like it's something new, and it's not anything new. That's something that's been talked about since the 20s with Charles Fort.
Yeah, see, my 14 mind gets the best of me when I'm thinking. I used to say this on the air. I'd say things like, well, the aliens aren't here to save us. They're here to eat us. I've been quoted as that I truly believe that. And that, I'm worried that, they're going to eat me first because I'm fat. But no, it's just the. It's
You're not fat, Clyde. You're big boned. That's what it is.
I'm big boned. Yes, I'm just saying that. What else would they want us for? I mean, look, there are things that our planet has that can be found anywhere in the universe. We have water. I'm sure that oxygen exists somewhere else. I'm sure all these things exist. But one of the things that don't is blood and the enzymes and things that they find in blood, and chlorophyll chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is one of these things that trees make. So between the chlorophyll and the blood, those would be two things, maybe gold, I don't know. Those are the things that aliens would, want from us. They certainly, look, they can get there all kinds of water everywhere else, but we're full of water. But it's just the idea that what resources would an alien want? They certainly don't want to take over. So they may see us as just dumb cattle that they come down every once in a while and pluck away. Everyone's, it's plucking us away one by one. Like Ford said, it's like we're all in this cupboard. They open the cupboard, they take us out, and they throw us away. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that, what they say, what is it? Shakespeare says, as flies to wanton boys, so are we to the gods. They use us for their pleasure. Yeah, look at the histories. Look at the Bible. Look at what they wanted, what the gods wanted in the Bible. They wanted blood sacrifices. Now, why did they want blood sacrifices? Why must the flesh be cut and bled in such a way that the gods are pleased by that? Okay. Remember Cain and Abel. Remember what happened in the Bible with Cain and Abel. Cain gave God an agri-sacrifice. He gave him his grains and grass and other things that he tilled. And God said, no, I want a blood sacrifice. I want blood. So what did Cain do? Killed Abel. There's my blood sacrifice. Have a good day. That's been a part of our history for a long time. It's a part of Jewish history. It's a part of a lot of histories to basically give blood sacrifices to the gods.
And
so
I
what does that tell you about the gods?
The question here is, what kind of God needs blood sacrifices or wants blood sacrifices, right?
A hungry God, a God that loves human flesh, God that, and think of the altars back in the day. You look at the altars and the way they were put together to burn cattle or sheep or whatever. They look like hibachis. It's like, God wants a barbecue. The aliens want a barbecue. They want to eat the flesh that is seared and burned as an offering to the gods. Now, why
Then
is
it's
that?
like,
They're
well, why
fleshy.
would you want to serve a god that that would do that to other human beings? That would be the next question, right?
Right. Well, I mean, what about you look at Baal, you look at Moloch, those gods, and they were given sacrifices all the time because of why? They worried the sun wasn't going to return. So they make a deal with this horned god, and the deal is hey, bring your kids. We're all going to have a big sacrifice. I don't ever understand why blood sacrifice, bloodlines, even vampire tales have all been part of our lives for centuries, maybe even millennia. I mean, the vampires go back to ancient Egypt, the bloodsuckers, the flesh eaters. So, and we were commanded somewhere in the Old Testament that we shouldn't eat flesh. So who knows? Maybe we're eating flesh the whole time and nobody talked about it. And the idea of ambrosia was the nectar of the gods. Ambrosia was blood. And that's the thing that scares me about, if we find this out about our ancestors. I mean, okay, and what is the ultimate thing that religion is about, especially Christian religion? The blood sacrifice of an unblemished man, a man without sin. Blood plays a part in our religious too. So why is that? It's because
the drinking
gods,
of the blood, taking of
Yep.
the flesh.
Yep. It's because it was a part
It's
of
a
our
ritual.
lives, and it was a part of what the gods wanted. And if the aliens are the gods, the aliens are carnivorous, then they want human flesh, or they want flesh, whether it be animal or human. That's why they mutilate cows. That's why they abduct humans, is because that has been the deal that's been made for millennia. And I know this is, I think you didn't want it to go this way, but the interview going this way, but certainly it's something to think about. I didn't even think it was going to go this way. Something to think about with regard to the aliens and what they may want from us. Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing that you would have to really prove, I mean, speculation is great and theories are great. I think the first thing that you would really have to prove to make these conclusions possible is if extraterrestrials and aliens really even exist. And as
Right.
far as I know, there's zero evidence and zero proof that they even exist, that to our knowledge, of course. And people really get upset with me whenever I say that, but there really isn't. It seems like it's a lot of stories, a lot of fairy tales, a lot of things that have no proof and no evidence behind them, but are taken as fact and truth when, we can't really even prove that they
It's
exist.
good to theorize. It's good to dig into why we have mythologies the way we have them. I mean, when people were talking about reptilians, okay, and they were saying that there are humans that are reptilians that are among us, that's all based on old fairy tales as well. I mean, you look at something like the Frog Prince. So the frog comes to this young maiden and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm a prince. If you let me sleep with you, I'll give you not only this gold or this crystal ball, but if you kiss me, I'll turn into a prince." So that basically says, so royals are reptiles, or they're amphibians, or they're something. The idea of the lizard-like creature telling a young woman to kiss him so that he can show that he's also a prince. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's like I always do this story about how The Exorcist, the movie The Exorcist, reminded me of Little Red Riding Hood. That moment where Father Karras comes in and he says, "Reagan, is there something in there with you, Reagan? Is there something going on with you, Reagan?" It's just like, "Grandma, what big eyes do you have? Grandma, what big teeth do you have?" Why? Grandma was possessed by the devil. Grandma was possessed by the beast. And what was it that Little Red Riding Hood was bringing Grandma? Bread and wine. They wanted her to take the sacrament so that she would not be full of the devil. But they got there too late because the devil had already possessed Grandma. Her eyes were that of a wolf. Her teeth were that of a vampire and a wolf. And then she attacked the young Little Red Riding Hood, and that's the story. But it's just the idea that grandma was possessed by a beast, and that Little Red Riding Hood attempted to give her the sacrament so she could be rid of this beast. And that was the whole idea behind the story. That's how I see it. It's just it's a tale of werewolfism. It's a tale of vampirism. It's a tale that eating the flesh and blood of a god protects you from the vampires. The cross protects you from the vampires. The blood of Christ protects you from the vampires. It's just a tale that gets told over and over again. So where do we get that? Where do we get that idea that there are vampires? Where do we get that idea that there are werewolves? They have to have been in existence at some time or another, or they've disappeared and we'll never see them again. But I have a feeling that maybe there are people out there with beast-like tendencies, because think about what monsters are. You know what monsters are? Monsters are people who stop pretending. And remember that. They stop pretending, and that's why they become monsters.
I think in a lot of cases, human beings can be considered monsters. For sure. I mean, just look at the history of the United States and how much savagery the United States has perpetuated upon a lot of different countries and upon our own people. Now, I kind of want to get back to this Yuba City 5 tale in theory, because there's another story that you may or may not be familiar with that I've looked into that's really interesting, and it's the Kamar-Duban incident, which happened in Russia in 1993, where 6 members of a 7-person hiking group fell to the ground and started convulsing and bleeding from their ears and their nose and their mouth, and they ultimately passed away. And the only difference between this event and the Dyatlov Pass event was that there was a survivor of this event, and her name was Valentina Ordachenko. And she survived by running down the mountain. She was in the forest and in the mountains by herself for like 2 days until she ran to the stream, and she found these people on a kayak, and then they got her, and then they took her to a police station, and she gave her police statement about what happened to her friends up on this mountain in Kamar-Duban. And she said that there's weird weather anomalies with a lot of these cases. Have you realized that, Clyde, that a lot of these missing people and these strange events, there's always some strange, weird weather anomaly. And as they were hiking up this mountain, they decided to descend back down the mountain because the weather was getting really bad. And they were in this single file line hiking back down the mountain as the gentleman in the very back of the group collapsed and fell to his knees. He was convulsing, bleeding out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. The leader of the group went to him. She started experiencing the exact same type of symptoms. She told the rest of them to go down the mountain to get to shelter and start a fire so that they can keep themselves warm. They hear her screaming, they run back up and then get close to her, and then they all start having the exact same experiences. 2 of them start taking off their clothes, rolling around on the ground. One girl even strikes her head against a rock multiple times until she had died. And this case is one of the more interesting because, it has a survivor. And I think that that's some of the most interesting ones, especially when it comes to the missing 411 people, is some of the most interesting stories are from the survivors of these things, because you actually know what had happened. And I find that case similar to the Dyatlov Pass case and this Yuba City 5 case.
Yeah, Dyatlov Pass is still something that I need to read more about. I just find it just completely it's just a terrifying story. The one that you just talked about was a terrifying story as well. In fact, what was the name of that TV show that just came out with Jodie Foster? They reenacted that for the Jodie Foster TV show that there was just in Alaska, where a group of scientists all went out and they ended up missing.
True Detective.
True Detective, yeah. In fact, they weren't even going to continue as the True Detective story. They wanted to make it stand on its own, but they put the True Detective thing on top of it to make it so people would watch it. But it was based on Dyatlov Pass. It was based on, how does this happen? How do these strange things happen? I'm sure they take off their clothes because of the hypothermia, because there gets to a point where you get so cold you feel warm, and your body's responding to it. But the idea of just falling down and going into convulsions and being sick, there's something about that. And when I think about it, I think of electromagnetic pulse. That, if we ever have an electromagnetic pulse, we would feel that way. That's why when you read about EMP, when you read about how EMP happens, you will feel an EMP because the magnetic field is going to change around you, and that's going to wreak havoc on your mind. It's going to wreak havoc on your body. Your body responds to electromagnetic power. We're all electromagnetic. So if the electromagnetic field is disrupted in any way, you're going to feel sick. That's why when earthquakes happen, a lot of people talk about how they've done studies to show that people, before an earthquake happens, people crave things like popcorn. They buy Rolaids because their stomachs are acting up. They feel sick, and the reason why is because the magnetic field under the planet is about to shoot a bolt of lightning through it. And when that big bolt of lightning hits, that's when the earthquake takes place. And so you're feeling that electromagnetic current changing, and you think, I want popcorn. I want something to take care of the way my stomach feels. I feel hungry, or I feel a pit in my stomach, or and so you're popping the Mylanta, or you're popping the Rolaids, and you're wondering, why am I so, or you're feeling dizzy, or you're hearing tones in your ears. That's because there's a magnetic flux that's changing. And if it hits you hard enough, it'll make you double over and throw up. And I think a lot of people don't realize that's what's going to happen if you have a pole shift. I mean, if you read Charles Hapgood, he talks about just exactly how it's going to affect the human body. I mean, pacemakers will go plooey. People's hearts will go nuts. They could have immediate psychosis. These are things that could happen if a magnetic field freaks out on you. And that's why, I always think about like Gatloff Pass. I think of what you just talked about. I think of the pulse that could have happened that created them to, feel that way, and to feel like they had to run because they felt like all of this electricity rolling through their bodies. They didn't know what to do about it. Sorry, I lost your sound. Are you muted? You're muted. Unmute.
My bad. I've been coughing a little bit, so I've been trying to make it to where I don't hear me coughing.
Okay.
This is the Wikipedia page for the Kamar Dubon incident. There's not a lot about this case. I actually learned the case from watching a documentary on HBO, which had the survivor of it, Valentina Odysee, on there giving her testimony of what happened. But according to Wikipedia, 1993 incident, 6 members of a 7-person hiking group led by Ludmila Korvinia died in a mysterious circumstances in 1993. Valentina Odysee was the only survivor. Despite the police receiving a report, no formal search was carried out until August 24th. It took 2 days for the helicopters to locate the remains of Valentina, because Valentina had not yet been able to recount her version of what happened. According to the autopsy report, all of them except Ludmila would have had a heart attack, were found to be died of hypothermia. What's interesting is I think that this happened in the spring. So I guess it depends on how cold it is. I'm sure it's probably pretty cold in Russia during the spring.
Well, you've heard, like, for example, when birds, the dead bird stories, they fly into something that's like a wall, and then they drop. And when they drop, there have been people who've seen them drop, and they run up to them, and they look at them, and they notice that either one of two things have happened: their hearts have exploded, or their lungs are bleeding. So something is going on there where some electromagnetic current or something pushes on the chest or pushes on the body, where it will either crush the lungs, bruise the lungs, or explode the heart. And like I say, whenever there's electromagnetic current, or when you get exposed to a very, very, very harsh magnetic current, people have heart attacks, people have strokes. And I think that could very well, I mean, sure, if you're standing there and you feel electromagnetic current and you drop, of course you're going to die of hypothermia, because you're not going to be able to take care of yourself because your heart is, having an arrhythmia, or you can't breathe because your lungs have been seared or whatever. I could easily see that as being an electromagnetic pulse from the sun or electromagnetic pulse from maybe HARP or some other electromagnetic machine that they have maybe at China Lake or someplace like that. I mean, I know that the Russians and the Chinese have Sura, and so Sura does their stuff. So you got HARP and you got Sura, and Sura can do the same thing as HARP, maybe worse.
It's interesting how they're like, oh yeah, these people died of like hypothermia, but they don't explain the reason why they would have died from hypothermia. Why did 6 very experienced hikers that would do this hike all the time die from hypothermia? It doesn't make any sense. Like they leave out the part, yeah, that might have been the actual cause of death whenever you found them, but what was it that caused them to die from hypothermia? You know, in this documentary that I learned this information from on HBO, of course it was a Bigfoot documentary, and they they related the incident to Bigfoot, that Bigfoot emits this I think they called it ultrasonic sound or infrared sound or something like that paralyzed these people and made them fall to the ground and start convulsing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about what you read about too. Let's go back to the Bible, where you read about how the Ark of the Covenant went into the tabernacle, and they were saying the Ark of the Covenant had so much power behind it, so much magnetic power, that anyone who came within like so many feet of it would just drop dead, or they dropped to their knees in pain. And it's because whatever this capacitor was, or whatever they created, had enough power to just drop whoever got near it. Some character named Uzzah touched it and was electrocuted right there on the spot. So whatever it was, some electromagnetic force, the force of, lightning or electromagnetic force, has brought people down before. We have, I've talked about the South Atlantic anomaly, the North Atlantic anomaly, South Atlantic anomaly many times on my program, where this anomaly keeps going around Africa, Yemen, Aden, all these areas. And they're saying it's because it's the thin nature, it's a thinner part of the magnetic field. And when it happens, people feel weird. They feel like time has stopped. They feel like there's a vortex of electromagnetic energy around them. It's called an eddy, and they compare it to a black hole, that there are many eddies in the ocean. There are many eddies on the planet where electromagnetic current goes and flows like a tornado, and a lot of strange things happen. You'll never see it because electromagnetic energy is invisible, but you'll feel
Were
it.
those eddies responsible for throwing those jellyfish up in Washington in 1994?
I don't know. You can just, you can speculate all you can. I don't know. Anything's possible. This Earth is like full of surprises. I mean, if you read a lot of the Fortean, Fortean information, you read H.G. Wells, you read all these different people that were living in the 1800s and into the 1900s. Some of the theories they had, they're outrageous, but, a lot of them, you look at Velikovsky, when he wrote about the electromagnetic theories about the planet and whether or not it's not gravity, but magnetics that hold us here. Well, you think about, what is our blood? It's got iron and ferrous and everything. Maybe we are magnetically adhered to this planet because of our because of what's in our bodies, salt water and ferrous. It's just interesting to explore. It's interesting to expand the mind. I think there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't harm people, but we got to be careful, and we have to understand what theory is and what fact is at the moment. Now, you can use theory to challenge facts. That's fine, but make sure that you don't lose yourself in something that is going to take you nowhere by just overthinking it and overdoing it.
Yeah, lose yourself in the theories there. But it's interesting you said you got an Eddie and you got a Yeti.
Eddie and Yeti.
Eddie and
Yeah.
Yeti. They're brothers.
They'll be Sesame Street characters before you know it. Eddie and Yeti.
Eddie and Yeti, baby. There's this other incident that I wanted to get your thoughts on that happened in Illinois, and I'm sure you're familiar with this because you're familiar with the Mothman and a lot of the big bird sightings in the United States, and that's the Lawndale incident. Are you familiar with the Lawndale incident, where this boy in Illinois was picked up by this giant thunderbird?
Yeah, I thought it was I was remembering a Lale Chusa story, but it changed over time that it was a Thunderbird. It was the child was picked up. I think it happened back in what was it 97?
77.
Okay, it was 77. And this happened, and I just know a little bit of the story because I mean it's it's like Mothman and several other stories like that. But I just remember that it reminded me of a Lale Chusa story or the white owl story, the big white owl that flies. It's a Latino story, but the big white owl story is more along the lines of witchcraft and the idea that the white owl is actually a woman that is a shapeshifter. So that's what I was thinking the Lawndale incident was about. But I mean, I could be corrected. I could be wrong. I just that's all I remember about the incident. What do you know about it?
Well, just based on this article, it's just really interesting how these. I mean, a bird is big enough to pick up this 10-year-old Marlin Lowe that was outside of his family home and just playing outside with friends, and apparently these two giant birds passed over, and one came down and grabbed the boy and apparently carried him for a few feet. And it wasn't until his mother came out and started yelling and screaming at the bird that the bird finally dropped him. And there was a bunch of witnesses to it. There was like 7 family members that was there that witnessed the same event. They all say the exact same thing happened, and people tended not to really believe the story. And
was the bird white? I remember it, like I say, Lale Chusa is all I think about here. The owl, the huge owl, that it had white. It was white feathered or white necked or white something.
Yeah, it was white necked. It had it had like a long white neck, long curled beaks, and supposedly wingspans of 10 or more feet. Like these birds are got to be freaking huge. That's kind of sort of what people talk about the Mothman as having as well in West Virginia. That wingspan that's 10 or more feet, and it's just a coincidence, right? That these. Do these giant birds really exist? I mean, who knows? I mean, we have the Native American legend of the Thunderbird, and it even goes farther back than that with the parasol bird, or piasol bird is what it's called.
Piasol bird, yeah.
Piasol bird, where these Native Americans, which kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier, would give human sacrifices to this piasol bird for the bird to leave them alone and stop killing their tribe.
What I enjoy is hearing the stories about the gargoyle, that a lot of Native American and Latin American countries say that they see Thunderbird or the gargoyle, which is it looks like a gargoyle, sort of a winged demon, long wingspan, and it flies around. And I remember seeing video a long time ago where I think it was in Puerto Rico, where somebody was filming outside. They had the street lights, and then there was this huge shadow that came over the street, and they said it was the gargoyle. It said something huge with a huge wingspan flew over the lights and basically scared them, and they said it was the gargoyle. And I just fell in love with that story. Mothman, anything that flies over me that can attack me scares the hell out of me, and so I have a fascination with that. So Mothman has always been. I don't know. Have you ever seen the movie Mimic? The movie Mimic is terrifying for those who believe in Mothman, who believe that Mothman's real, because these aren't moths; these are cockroaches that are huge, that basically mimic humans, and they look like humans until they start flapping their wings and start picking up babies. But just the idea of something flying over me that has an exoskeleton that's going to pick me up scares the holy hell out of me. I don't know why. It's like a jumping spider. I mean, I'm glad I don't live near the cicadas. I probably freak out because I think insects that do that like to bug you are the ones that I fear most. The ones that bug you. I mean, literally want to crawl down your pants or crawl up your face or land on you and shove needles in your skin. Those are scary for anybody.
I have a theory about the Mothman that I want to run by you really quickly, because I'm from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and a lot of the residents during the Mothman sightings, they were really frightened because apparently the Men in Black showed up. They kind of threatened a lot of the witnesses and a lot of the families surrounding the scene, the Mothman. And it wasn't long after that uh, well, I mean, from what we know about the Men in Black, they normally come to you with like an ultimatum. Now, regardless of, if you think that there's some extraterrestrial force or some non-human force, or if you believe that they're the government, right? Doesn't really matter. They normally come to you and be like, hey, stop talking about this, or something bad is going to happen. That's normally what they say from the incidents going back all the way to the Murray Island incident in Washington State. Now, not long after the Mothman sightings, and people were really furious about the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant. And a lot of people don't really know about that. It really had the town in an uproar. It had people of the town were going out in the TNT area with pitchforks and freaking flaming sticks, and they were trying to hunt down whatever this creature was, because it's one of the most documented cryptozoology creatures in the history of the United States. Several police reports written about it. And it's not long after that the Silver Bridge came down. And magically, after the Silver Bridge came down, no one ever saw the Mothman again. And I think that that's pretty suspicious. I think that's weird. They were seeing this creature for a really long time. Men in Black, they get a visit from the Men in Black. The Men in Black are, probably like, hey, stop talking about the Mothman, something bad is going to happen. And then it turns out something bad did happen. It's the biggest bridge collapse in U.S. history. Now, my theory that I propose is that it seems like a high possibility, and I talked about this on Ryan Gable's show, the Secret Teachings, as well, and I'm the only person that I've ever heard come up with this theory, is that it's possible that the Silver Bridge collapse was done on purpose, that they purposefully brought down the Silver Bridge, and there possibly could have been something real to the Mothman, and the tragedy of the Silver Bridge collapse and everyone being in an uproar of their family members and their friends and people dying, that gave whatever amount of time for whoever to go out into the TNT area and take care of the Mothman. Now, that's under the assumption that the Mothman is real, like that is a real phenomenon, right? But it seems like a plausible theory. What do you think of that theory?
You want to hear my theory?
Yeah.
I like your theory. Do you want to hear my theory?
Yeah.
The people of Point Pleasant were dosed. I believe they were dosed, that the water supply was dosed with LSD or something that created the Mothman, that whatever the Mothman was, they were seeing the Mothman. They were dosed in the water supply. And this is why when the Men in Black were going, if you remember, the Men in Black went door to door. And what did they do when they went door to door? They told people, you didn't see anything, but here's something that will help you deal with it. They handed them pills. They handed them drugs. And they had the drugs analyzed, and they found out they were the same drugs they give to people for urinary tract infections. Now, why would they give them drugs that would treat urinary tract infections unless there's something in the water that would harm the kidneys and the bladder? So that's my theory, is that probably they don't. And I believe that, yes, they brought down the bridge on purpose, but it was to break the trip that everybody was on. They needed something to reverse,
bring people back to reality.
Bring them back to reality. Everything is, when you think about the Mothman, and what a lot of people don't realize is that the Mothman happened around the same time Fantasia came out in theaters. Okay. And Fantasia, of course, has Cernunnos, or it has they call them Cernunnos, the big Night on Bald Mountain scene where they had the wings of this huge demon that they patterned after Bela Lugosi. And some people claim that what had happened is that the people who saw that movie were the ones that were affected most by the Mothman sighting, because they remember it in their subconscious, and the Mothman is a subconscious manifestation of that character in the Fantasia movie. So I don't know. That's a weird theory. That was one of my theories, but it's just the idea that, something like LSD or it was like another gain of function exercise, like what they do with blobs, is they find a small area where a small group of people will be affected. They put drugs in the water supply, and people start seeing things. They start getting visited by men in black who are saying, here's some pills you need to take to feel better. And if you say anything about what's going on, we will kill you, or we will come after you. You do as you're told. And then people are all, scared about this creature. And then they have something else to be scared about. And that is a bridge that collapses and kills all these people at Christmas time. Imagine it happened around Christmas time. So, people were seeing presents in the water. People were, that was the sad thing, is all the people who were rescuing those people said, I saw Christmas presents floating in the Ohio River. And, it's just a weird theory, but I got that theory when I was reading Keel's book. And also when I saw the Mothman Prophecy movie, it's like when Gear was getting phone calls from Indrid Cold, and it was almost like he was having a hallucinatory experience, that maybe they were all being drugged in the water supply, and that's why they were the way they were. They were all confused. They didn't know what to do. It was kind of a light type of LSD acid trip that they were on. It was just a test to see if they could drug an entire town and what the results would be. That's what
wow, that is an incredible theory. I never thought of that before. And there's some truth there, because the TNT area, water, all the lakes in the TNT area is polluted and has been polluted for a really long time. And some parts of it are still polluted from the Air Force base that was out there. They were just dumping all the chemicals directly into the lakes out there in the TNT area. Mm-hmm. And also, not only that, West Virginia State did blood tests in the early 2000s of the residents, and they would give them $500 per person to come and get 10 vials of blood taken at this little trailer inside of the town. Mm-hmm. And that was to test for the water, the tap water that people were drinking in the town. So there's some credence right there. I never thought of that, but you do. Either way it goes, I still think that they brought that bridge down on purpose.
Yeah, I think so too. It was a part of the reality check. They did it because everybody was, they were basically taken over by the fear and depression of something they couldn't control. Feeling listless and tired after being drugged, and they needed something to break the monotony, and that's what they got. They got a bridge collapse. And again, I have no proof of that, but I do know, though, that, you just think of the area where they saw the Mothman. They saw it in an area where, like you said, the water table is full of all kinds of different basalt and other things that would go into the water content. And it would be easy to sneak in some sort of a drug that would cause this type of a condition. And so that's why, I don't talk about this theory much, but it's just something that secretly has been in the back of my mind as to what may have happened in Point Pleasant. That they were all drugged and they were all dosed, and the men in black went door to door to give people, medications to, kind of bring down the effects of it. And that's how it went.
Anna's saying that May 1st is the date it happened. No, it happened December 15th.
Right.
It was a few weeks before Christmas that the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia collapsed. Right. Yeah, I think we should get into, that's an amazing theory. I never thought of that before. It's I think you might be onto something there. Should make a documentary about it. We can
if I can find some substantial evidence to pull my theory, I would love that, because it's always been in the back of my mind that maybe this was some sort of an experiment, and that like I said, those were affected who saw the Mothman were probably the same people who saw the Disney movie, and that it was in their subconscious mind, and it came out and it got loose. And people saw it, and people who were dosed all saw it. I mean, think about it. You saw a child saw him, You have lovers seeing him. You have a woman that's holding a baby that saw him. You just think of all the demographic of people who saw Mothman, and you figured maybe they went and saw a Disney movie. Who knows? And maybe they were affected by the sight of Chernobog. That was the name of the character. Chernobog was the name of the character, not Carnunos, but Chernobog. And for me, even when I watch it now, the Night on Bald Mountain scares me. It's a scary scene in a Disney classic cartoon.
Very interesting. I think for the last few minutes here, I think we should probably talk about contact in the desert. I think I'm done with all the things that I wanted to talk with you about. And you're going to be presenting a lecture at Contact in the Desert here, correct? What are you going to be speaking about at Contact here from May 30th to June 3rd, 2024?
I'm going to be talking about techno-signatures and machinery that may be godlike or that may be from the skies. I'm going to interview Avi Loeb. I'm going to interview Matthew James Bailey. Of course, much of what they talk about is AI, how it works with aliens. I'm leaning towards the theory that aliens are pretty much synthetic intelligence, and that basically is what I'm pointing to. It's a synthetic intelligence thing where, somebody has programmed these little robots that look like, little characters like that, programmed them to fly around the cosmos. So they've been doing it for thousands of years.
And they come in the form of, in these meteorites, this technology?
They just come in the form of what we see, the alien grays. They look like little babies. They look non-threatening, and they're machines to look biological, but they're synthetic. The way they get fuel is they get it from the sunlight, or they get it from light itself. Something along the lines of photosynthesis. That's why when a lot of people are abducted by aliens, they say the aliens smell like outhouses. It's because I think they digest their food or whatever it is they take in. They digest it through the skin. Waste is then let out through the skin, and that's why it smells bad. It's just the idea that these are biological-looking creatures that are synthetic, and that they've lasted for thousands of years.
Yeah, the gray alien story really resembles like fairy lore a lot to me. And does it not, you? That
Oh yeah, fairy lore, leprechaun lore, the little people. Yeah, it's all the same through time, and we probably have to even reevaluate what we think angels are, because if you look in the Bible and you read, when the angels came to announce that Jesus was born, why was it the shepherds fell on their face and were so afraid? It's because the angels were not attractive. They weren't the cherubs that we see in paintings, Renaissance paintings. They probably looked like aliens. They probably had a face that, was indescribable, that, didn't look all that quite human. Why is it that when Jesus died and he rose from the grave, he had to go to a mountain and do something called transfiguration, where people saw what he really looked like? You see, these are things that make you wonder about our alien heritage and whether or not, there's this hidden story of aliens, or that we are aliens, that we are part of a Martian sojourn, that when Mars became uninhabitable, we decided to move on, and that the fall of man was literally a fall of man, a fall from Mars to the fall to the earth. And that's why we hear the story of a garden of plentiful beauty, and that was Mars, and then we left that for another state, and this is why we're here. We were just basically pioneers that decided to seed a planet that was full of life, and we're lucky that we're all here. We've managed to stay around for as long as we have.
Well, when you think about it, if you go to a different country, Clyde, you're considered an alien, right?
Right, you are. Mm-hmm.
And then if you just slap on illegal in front of alien, you get a completely different outlook of what's going on, right? You get, a lot of people think, oh, well, like people in the community like to say, they're all around us. They've always been here. They're creating human alien hybrids. Well, it makes a lot more sense when you just tack on illegal in front of the name there, and
Yes, it's true.
you just look around, and they all are around us. They're always around us. They've always been here, right? Tends to make a little bit more sense than extraterrestrial
Yeah,
aliens. And
wherever they are, they could be dimensional for all we know. And why do you think they're doing these experiments at places like CERN? They want to open up these areas where the Titans can return, the old ones can return, the Genesis 6 beings can return, whatever you want to call them, the Nakash, the Grigori, the Watchers, the Nephilim. It's some pretty interesting history.
yeah, it is really interesting. And then with crash retrievals, and I think there's multiple meanings and multiple ideas to a lot of the buzzwords that go around within the community, and I think that they mean they have multiple meanings, and the perception of them are different than what they're actually meaning. Like crash retrieval doesn't need to be something that happened in modern times. Crash retrieval can be something that was dug up. If you go to an archaeological dig, you find some kind of craft or something, that's still a crash retrieval. It doesn't matter the amount of time that's passed in between the event happening and the time that you find it, still a crash retrieval.
Yeah, what is a chariot of fire but a burning vehicle that's flying through the air? What is a flying shield, a burning shield, something that's flying in the air? What is a flying scroll, something that looks like a thing in the sky that looks like a flying scroll? All unidentified objects that were seen in the Bible, all unidentified things that were seen in ancient writings, Dead Sea Scrolls, Vimanas of the Indians, the Hindus, the Vimanas, the Upanishads. All these things talk about some sort of connection between us and what is out in heaven. And why is it that we pray to a heaven instead of praying to a ground? It's because we believe that we came from there. We came from out there. Came from heaven, and going home, it means going back out there. So, I mean, there's always that. We don't always know why we say the things we say, but we say them. And what do they really mean? Well, if God is in heaven, he doesn't live on this planet. So what is he? He's an extraterrestrial. Plain and simple.
I mean, that makes sense if you believe in God and you take the Christian version of what God is, and that there even is a heaven. I know some people would debate if heaven even exists, or if it's a man-made construct or something that we have in turn created ourselves as like an egregoric type of reality that we put our energy, thoughts, and ideas and beliefs into, and then it makes it real.
Well, it's a Hallmark card version of what is going on. I mean, I always tell people that when I die, I'm the type of person, that I would rather have Ouija board duty when I die than, having to go up into the sky, wear a terry cloth robe, play a harp, and worship a guy that looks like Barry Gibb. I don't think I'd be able to handle that. But I think it'd be great if we're able to explore the heavens, explore the universe, find what creation is, realize that it's all quantum entanglement, that we are able to become part of the quantum universe, and basically wind up somewhere else being happy and enjoying another ride. I just don't think that it's something called eternal progression. It's something called it's something that means that we'll always be here. We've never began and we've never ended. That's hard to contemplate. So that we've always been here. We always go through adventures. We always have amazing times, and we have experiences that build up inside of all of us. And maybe there is a point where you retire. Maybe there is a point where you go up on a mountain somewhere and stare at the two suns. I don't know. But in the meantime, sure is a great life to be exploring some of this stuff we talk about. And I've enjoyed it. I'm enjoying myself still. And like I say, I'm getting older now. But I still have this idea of a childlike interest in all of this stuff, because it's still fascinating and beautiful, and makes me feel more alive to know that we're an active planet, not a finite planet that most people want it to be.
Well, wouldn't the implications of reincarnation technically mean that there's no other place to go. If we're constantly brought back to this earth over and over again, I mean, of course, deductive reasoning isn't proof or, evidence, but it would seem like that if, we're just here forever, and our consciousness keeps coming back and regurgitating, it's just a different life and a different body, then that would somewhat to me imply that there isn't any other place to go, that this is it.
Yeah, maybe so. I would just say, though, that when we're looking at dimensions, we're looking at second genesis, when we're looking at all these possibilities, it could be dimensions in one place. It could be planets of other planets. It could be whatever. I just think that, the adventure better be good when you die, because you're dead a lot longer than you're alive. And so there's got to be a reason why, we're dead for as long as we are, that it's permanent, and that maybe, like I say, this form that we have, your form, my form, it's just like a radio or a TV that is a receptor. We receive, we transmit, and then one day it stops, and we find another place to transmit, another place to settle ourselves and speak.
Perfect. Clyde, thanks so much for coming on, my friend. Really appreciate your time this evening. Can you let people know where to find you online, where they can listen to your radio show, GroundZero Radio, and one more time that you are going to be at Contact in the Desert this year, May 30th through June 4th?
Sure. You can hear our radio show. We're all across the country on the radio, but the most important thing is we want you to go to groundzero.radio and listen there. We have a network of shows, not just Ground Zero, but a number of people like Ryan Gable and others that are available to listen to. JP, all these different radio talk show hosts that talk about the paranormal. So it's a good paranormal network at groundzero.radio. We also have something that's similar to maybe a Disney Plus or a Netflix. It's called aftermath.media. And you go to aftermath.media, there are two subscriptions. You can either have the basic subscription where you're listening to my shows commercial free and in stereo, or you can get a premium subscription where not only do you get shows to listen to, but you also get to have access to our document files, to videos that we have that you can watch at your own leisure. They're videos about UFOs, old videos, classic videos. We have study groups, we have chat, we have social media. It's all playground with people that have the same ideas as you, the same mindset as you. And so please, if you're listening and you like what you heard today, go to aftermath.media and listen to some of the past shows, listen to them at your own convenience, listen to them all at once if you want to. Aftermath.media, it's aftermath.media. And yes, I will be at Contact in the Desert. We'll be talking about the machinery of the aliens. It's going to be an interesting show about technosignatures and synthetic aliens and all that. Right there at Contact in the Desert. It'll be May 30th through June 3rd, Indian Wells, California. You go to contactinthedesert.com to find out more.
The links to all of Clyde's information will be in the description of this video, and the link to get the on-sale ticket to Contact in the Desert this year, May 30th through June 3rd. Come by and say hi. Me and Clyde will be there. Also, Ryan Gable will be there, and a lot of other people that you're not going to want to miss. A really great lineup and really great speakers this year. And thanks to everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. Cheryl, Nina, Shaking the Hidden, and anybody else that contributed to the chat here this evening. Really appreciate you guys. And we are back on Facebook. A long hiatus, almost a year off of Facebook, but we are back and we are live on there. So follow the Raised by Giants page on Facebook. Hit the like button on there. I will be putting the link in the description for that as well. And please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications, and the links to all of my information are also in the description of this video. All right, until we see you guys next time. Clyde, stay with me, my friend.